On the morning Eleanor Parker turned 72, she woke before the sun, not because she was excited, but because sleep had slowly learned how to avoid her, slipping away quietly like people often did once they decided she was old enough to understand being alone. And as she sat on the edge of her bed in her small Ohio home, the house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest, the kind that reminds you how many voices used to live there, how many footsteps once echoed down the hallway, how many arguments, laughs, slammed doors, and late-night whispers had once made this place feel alive. And Eleanor breathed in deeply, the scent of dust and old wood mixing with the faint smell of the lavender soap she had used for decades, the same brand she used back when her husband Robert was alive and teased her for being loyal to things that never changed. And she smiled at the memory, even though it brought a familiar ache, because memories, she had learned, were bittersweet companions, loyal but demanding, always asking you to feel everything again. And she shuffled toward the kitchen, making herself a cup of tea, the kettle whistling loudly in the silence, almost sounding impatient, and she laughed softly at that, because even the kettle seemed to be reminding her that time moved forward whether she felt ready or not. And she sat at the small table by the window, watching the neighborhood wake up, families moving in, children growing up, people leaving. And halfway down the block, she noticed a young woman sitting on the curb, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking, crying in a way that suggested she was trying very hard not to be seen. And Eleanor paused, hesitated, because the world had taught her that approaching strangers was risky, that people might misunderstand kindness, that an old woman asking if you're okay might feel intrusive, and she almost kept walking, but something tugged at her, something familiar in the young woman's posture, something that reminded Eleanor of herself years ago, sitting in her car after a double shift, exhausted and overwhelmed, wondering how long she could keep carrying everything alone. And without fully deciding, Eleanor spoke softly, asking, "Are you all right, dear?" And the young woman looked up, startled, eyes red, mascara smudged, and she shook her head, saying she'd just been laid off, that rent was due, that her family lived across the country, that she felt like she was failing at adulthood despite doing everything she was told was right. And Eleanor listened, truly listened, not interrupting, not offering quick solutions, just nodding, just being present. And when the young woman finished, Eleanor sat beside her on the curb, her joints protesting, but her heart steady. And she said, "I don't have advice that fixes things overnight, but I can tell you this. Feeling lost doesn't mean you are broken. It usually means you are between chapters." And the young woman stared at her, quiet now, and asked Eleanor's name. And Eleanor told her, and they talked for nearly an hour about life, about fear, about how the world feels like it's always asking you to be more, with giving you less time to figure out how. And when they finally stood up, the young woman hugged Eleanor tightly, thanking her, saying she hadn't realized how badly she needed someone to listen. And as Eleanor walked home, her steps felt lighter, her chest warmer, because for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not because someone remembered her birthday, but because she mattered in that moment. And that evening, when Eleanor returned home, she found an envelope slipped through her mail slot, handwritten, unfamiliar, and inside was a simple card that read, "Happy birthday, Eleanor. Thank you for always showing up for others. Love, Mrs. Alvarez." Her neighbor from 3 houses down, a woman Eleanor once helped after a fall, a woman she thought barely remembered her name. And Eleanor sat down, holding the card, tears spilling freely now, because she realized something important, something she wished she'd understood sooner, that being invisible is often an illusion created by silence, that impact doesn't always announce itself, that kindness echoes quietly and returns when you least expect it. And over the next weeks, Eleanor's life didn't suddenly transform into something dramatic or grand, but small things changed, meaningful things. She began volunteering at the local library, reading to children who climbed into her lap as if she had always been there. She started bringing extra soup to neighbors neighbors, leaving it on porches without expecting thanks. She wrote letters to her children, not asking for visits, but sharing stories. And slowly, responses came. Phone calls lasted longer, visits happened more often. And Eleanor understood that while time had taken much from her, it had also given her something precious, the ability to be fully present, to love without a rush, to listen without distraction. And on her 73rd birthday, Eleanor woke early again, but this time she smiled, because she knew the quiet didn't mean emptiness, it meant space. Space she had learned to fill with purpose, with compassion, with the simple truth that as long as you are breathing, you are still part of the story, still capable of changing someone's day, still capable of being remembered not by numbers or celebrations, but by the way you make others feel. And Eleanor wrote in her notebook once more, "I am still here, and that is enough."